Hello everyone. Welcome to Huawei Firewall Multimedia Configuration course. In this course, you will learn the mechanism and configuration method of the URL filtering function. Before getting to know the URL filtering function, let's first see what a URL is. Our daily work and life are closely related to the internet. We can search the internet for information, news, and videos. Each web page has a unique address, also known as Uniform Resource Locator. When we search the internet, we access various websites through corresponding URLs. For an enterprise, its employees can access any website if accessible URLs are not filtered. If employees usually access work-unrelated websites during work hours, their work efficiency will surely be compromised. Access to malicious websites may cause confidential information leaks or even virus, Trojan horse, and worm attacks. Video and game traffic is bandwidth hungry, compromising employees' internet access experience and work efficiency. When employees access extranets, the firewall analyzes URL information in HTTP packets, extracts URLs, and matches them with configured policies. For example, if you deem that portal websites shall be accessible to employees, you shall configure the policies in that way, so that the firewall can permit traffic of access to portal websites. If you configure policies to block access to game websites, the firewall blocks traffic of access to game websites. In addition, the firewall pushes a message to the user, to explain why the access is blocked. Actually, it's a common thing that the browser displays a message of connection failure and gives possible causes. When we attempt to access a URL, the firewall pushes similar messages, with their content being configurable. The URL filtering function processes only HTTP packets. To process HTTPS packets, you must also enable the SSL proxy function. This figure shows a complete URL, which consists of the protocol, host name, port, path, and parameter fields. HTTP and HTTPS are the most common protocol field values. The firewall automatically removes the protocol field in pre-processing. The host name field contains the domain name or IP address of the web server. The port field is optional. If the default port of a protocol is used, the port in the URL can be omitted. For example, the default port for HTTP is 80, and that for HTTPS is 443. If the default port is not used, the port must be specified. For example, HTTP uses port 8080. The path field indicates a directory or file path, and presents the structure on the web server. Resources accessed by users are under this directory. The parameter field is usually a very complicated and long string of characters that describes web parameters. The firewall is case-insensitive in processing URLs. In the configuration of URL rules on the firewall, lowercase letters are usually used. For such a URL, what content does the firewall filter? The firewall can perform filtering based on the entire URL or the host name field only. Accordingly, the firewall supports the configuration of two types of filtering rules, namely, URL rules and domain name rules. The matching scope of a URL rule can be the entire URL, whereas that of a domain name rule is the host name field only. The URL and domain name rules support the same matching modes. Let's see the matching mode supported by the URL rule as an example. The first mode is prefix matching. For example, URL rule www.example.com asterisk is configured. The asterisk is a wildcard that can represent any string. This URL rule can match all URLs starting with www.example.com, such as the two in the table. The second mode is suffix matching. For example, URL rule *ASPX is configured. This URL rule can match all URLs ended with ASPX, such as the two in the table. The third mode is keyword matching. For example, URL rule *example.com is configured. This URL rule can match all URLs containing example.com, such as the 2 in the table. The last mode is exact matching. For example, URL rule www.example.com is configured. You can see that this rule has no wildcards. When the firewall processes URL information, it first compares the URL against the specified string. If the URL does not match the string, it removes the last directory in the URL, and compares the remaining part against the string. If the remaining part does not match the string, it removes the last directory in the remaining part. This process continues until it matches the domain name against the string. Therefore, rule www.example.com can match the first 2 URLs, but not the latter 2. Huawei Firewall categorizes a massive number of URLs for category-specific URL filtering. For example, you can allow employees to access portal websites like Yahoo, but not video websites like YouTube. Currently, Huawei Firewall contains more than 95 million URLs, in 137 subcategories of the 45 categories, and the numbers are still increasing. The URL filtering function supports multiple filtering modes. To simplify the description, we hereby use URL rules to refer to both types of them, unless otherwise specified. First, let's see waitlist filtering. A URL waitlist is a list of websites accessible to users. The firewall permits request packets that match waitlist rules. In contrast with the waitlist is the blacklist. A URL blacklist is a list of websites inaccessible to users, and the firewall blocks request packets that match blacklist rules. Predefined categories are the basis of category-specific filtering. You can set a response action, such as allow, alert, or block, for a certain predefined category. When a user accesses a URL of a predefined category, the firewall processes the request packet as configured. You can also create user-defined categories that are supplementary to predefined ones to facilitate routine management. In addition, you can directly add URL rules to predefined categories. Such rules also belong to user-defined categories. The list of malicious URLs is a dynamic list that does not require manual configuration. Instead, it is generated based on the feedback of the antivirus and sandbox interworking functions. This improves the detection efficiency of the firewall. Next, let's see the procedure of URL filtering. In a scenario of enterprise employees accessing websites, after an employee initiates a connection request, the firewall extracts URL information from the request packet and performs URL filtering. The firewall first searches the waitlist for the requested URL. If the URL is found, the firewall allows the request. If the URL is not found, the firewall continues to search the blacklist for the URL. If the URL is found in the blacklist, the firewall blocks the request. If the URL is not found, the firewall continues to search the user-defined URL categories for the URL. Note that URL rules involved in this process include those in user-defined categories and those manually added to predefined categories. If the URL is found in a user-defined URL category, the firewall processes the request according to the action for the category, which can be allow, alert, or block. If the URL is not found, the firewall continues to search the malicious URLs for the URL. If the URL matches a malicious URL, the firewall blocks the request. If the URL does not match any malicious URL, the firewall continues to search the predefined URL categories for the URL. If the URL is found in a predefined URL category, the firewall processes the request according to the action for the category, which can be allow, alert, or block. If the URL is still not found, the firewall implements a default action. You can set the default action to allow, alert, or block. Next, let's see how to configure the URL filtering function on the web UI. First, choose Object, URL Category. You can view information about predefined URL categories in URL Category List. For example, P2P, download, and humanity are URL categories, and ebooks, literature, and arts are URL subcategories. You cannot see URL rules contained in each subcategory. That is, you cannot see the content in the predefined URL category database. However, you can query the category to which a URL belongs. Enter www.google.com in the search text box. Click Search. www.google.com belongs to the Search Engines subcategory, under the Search Engines Portals category. Let's try again. Enter www.facebook.com and click Search. The URL belongs to the Blogs Community subcategory, under the Social Network category. Click the name of any subcategory, such as P2P. The name and description of the predefined category are unavailable for change. Enter the URL and domain name rules in the two text boxes below. As described earlier, rules in predefined URL categories cannot be modified. However, you can manually add rules to predefined categories. For example, you can add www.google.com to the P2P category. Let's search for the category of www.google.com again. You can see that categories P2P and search engines are displayed. Let's move on to user-defined categories. Click Add and specify the category name, such as Test. The category description is optional. Then configure the URL and domain name rules. Enter www.google.com and the URL rule. Click OK. Search for the category of www.google.com again. www.google.com belongs to three categories. Once a user accesses www.google.com, which category does the firewall allocate it to? According to the preceding URL filtering procedure, user-defined categories have a higher priority than predefined categories in terms of the matching order. Therefore, the firewall may determine that www.google.com belongs to the test or P2P category. Note that www.google.com in the P2P category and www.google.com in the user-defined category both belong to user-defined rules. As for the action of the firewall, we'll talk about it later. Next, let's see how to use URL categories for URL filtering. Choose Object, Security Profiles, URL Filtering. Click Add to create a URL filtering profile. Set the name to Test Profile. Here is an action mode configuration, based on which the preceding firewall action issue can be answered. If a URL matches two categories, what is the action of the firewall? Assume that the actions of the two categories are different. One is allow, and the other is block. In strict mode, the firewall blocks the request. In loose mode, the firewall allows the request. The default action is allow, that is, the firewall permits packets for URLs that do not match any category. Now let's see how to add a URL or domain name in the whitelist or blacklist. For example, add www.yahoo.com to the whitelist and www.game.com to the blacklist. URL filtering level enables you to set the action of each URL category. You can set actions for user-defined or predefined categories one by one or in batches. The system has three default levels of high, medium, and low. After you select a level, the system automatically processes actions of predefined categories in batches. As for user-defined categories, however, batch setting is unavailable, and you must manually set them. Let's have a test. Select the high and low levels respectively. The actions of certain categories are changed. Click OK. You can see the newly created URL filtering profile test profile in the list. Till now, you have not completed configuring the URL filtering function yet. Instead, you must reference the URL filtering profile in Security Policies. Choose Policy. Security Policy. Security Policy. Click Add and then add Security Policy to create a security policy. Set the name to SEC and enter the filtering conditions. For example, the source security zone is trust, the destination security zone is untrust, and the action must be permit. If you set the action to deny, URL filtering is not implemented. Select the created URL filtering profile in the drop-down list of URL filtering, and click OK. Click Commit on the upper right corner to activate the configuration. Till now, you have completed the configuration and application of the URL filtering function. At last, let's see how to maintain the URL filtering function. You can obtain necessary information through URL logs. Choose Monitor. Log. URL log. To display the list of URL logs, you can see logs of matching the whitelist, blacklist, user-defined categories, predefined categories, and malicious URLs. Note that for user-defined and predefined categories, logs are not recorded if you set the action to allow. Logs are recorded only when you set the action to alert or block. We've completed the course. Thank you for staying with us.